What I'm going to talk about tonight is for a while, I'm going to talk about the first method that I spoke about. The other two we will speak about later, because the other two are much more connected to the Gemara and so on. And the first one is not connected to Gemara. In fact, Gemara is usually not the best place to learn the first one, and we'll understand this later on. But the first one is the most powerful of them all, and you're going to see tonight why it is so powerful. I'm going to tell you why it is such an important method to do it. Fundamentally, what the method has to do is something called, and we said last week, the concept called structure. Structure is not a simple organization. You can organize information in many different ways. For example, you can organize information alphabetically, or by alphabet. You organize it based on alphabet, gimel, dal. It's also an organization. You can organize things along the different, what's called in English, criteria, or principles. The organization that we talk about is called structural because basically, and this is what's very important, and it's a tremendous chiddush, is that we structure something or organize something based on the structure of the material itself. This is very important because most people say, how can information have a structure? Basically, how does it have a structure? But it does. All information in the form of data or in the form of facts, when you put them all together, they have a structure that they determine, not me. It's like I told you last week about the diamond, remember? If you cut a diamond in a certain way, it has its own structure. If you go against the structure, you break the diamond in 1,000 pieces, you shatter it. But if you want to cut a diamond in a way where it doesn't shatter, it just simply cuts in a way where it remains whole, or what's called intact, then what you have to say, what is your structure, and I'll follow you. And that's a diamond cutter. A diamond cutter may sit and study a stone for a month before he touches it with a hammer and chisel, because he wants to discover what exactly is the structure of this. So this is very important. So in English, the word for something that exists in itself, it has its own nature. The English word for that is called intrinsic. It depends on the thing itself, intrinsic. If it's not depending on the thing itself, it's called to be extrinsic, or it's outside of it. Okay. The ability to structure information depends on what's called the discovery of the intrinsic design of the information itself. And you're going to see what I'm saying tonight. I'm going to actually demonstrate this in many, many different ways. Okay, let's go simpler. Let's do it simpler and so on. And eventually we'll get above a comma and so on. We'll do a little bit of that tonight. But let's take an example. Okay, let's take an example of taharis. Taharis is the sixth seder of the Gemara of Shas. And it talks about the laws of Tumah Torah and so on and so forth. Now, if you look at all the Masechtas and Taharos, and whatever, 10 of them, at least, if you look at all the Masechtas and Taharos, you say to yourself, what's the logic? Is there an organization? Is there an organization of all these Masechtas? Does it have an organization? Okay, so in order to determine organization, the first thing you have to ask yourself is this. You have to identify something in English which is called a scheme. That's what it's called in English. A scheme simply means what's happening here? What is the action taking place in all these halachas? When you take all the halachas of Taurus, you say to yourself, what's going on here? What action is happening? Okay? That's called a scheme. So when you look at Taurus and you say, what's the scheme? The question is, can anyone tell me, and sometimes I do this, what's happening in Taurus? If you take all the Masechtas together, can somebody tell me the storyline or the action that's taking place? And anyone want to tell me, based on what you know of Taurus, for example. Can anyone tell me the basic action that's taking place that applies to almost all of the Masechtas? Quickly. Any volunteers? What's that?
How do you become Tommy? How do you become Torah?
How do we become Torah? Become Torah, right? Okay, this is true. But the real thing, but if you want to expand on what this gentleman was saying, it's funny too. It talks about how does it become Tomei. And if you say, how does something become Tomei? So when you realize that, you say, well, something becomes Tomei because of a certain action. What's the action? the action, okay, is that first of all, there's something called a source, or makor, a source that has it, okay? And the source in Hebrew is the matame. So the first thing we do is that we understand that there are certain things which possess Torah. They possess Torah. Okay, they possess it. Why? Because they generate it. Why? We don't know. But fundamentally, they generate Torah. For example, what produces Torah in itself? Okay, you generate Torah. For example, a sheretz. You have certain types of animals that when they die, they suddenly become Torah. Okay, certain people generate Torah. For example, a zav or a matzura, and so on. So we see that there are certain types of sources or matame that create the tumah themselves. Now, once that thing has tumah, what does it do? It gives it over to someone else. So we see that the action takes place is that there's some kind of giving or nesima, or we call a transmission. There's a transmission. And who does it give it to? It gives to a receiver, okay, which is a makabo, exactly. In English, the fancy word for receiver, well, is recipient or receiver. I don't want to belabor receiver. Okay. Or what they call in Hebrew, a makabo. Something to receive it, okay? And when it receives it, okay, the makabo becomes a nitma. That's fundamentally what happens. This is what's called a scheme. It's the fundamental scheme of all tumah v'tara. There's a matame, there's a source, transmits its tumah, whatever that is, okay, and it gives this over to something else, another thing, and so on. It's called the nitma and so on. Now, once we have this nitma, we have something interesting. This nitma itself can give tumah. Okay, so we find something interesting, that this nitma itself can become an actual, what's called a source. It's a source, but, okay, it's also matame, but it's a very different than this. This is matame because it generates its tumah. So this is called a generative. It generates tumah. This doesn't generate, so we call this generates, and this doesn't, it perceives it. So a fancy word in English, okay, it's called, it perceives it or derives it. It's said to be what's called a derivative. It derives it or gets it from something else. So we see right away the beginning of a picture. There's the matame, the one that generates it, then it receives a makabel, but it derives it so it becomes a source. Now, what does this do? This can also now give tumah again, okay? So, it suddenly goes down like this, and now what happens? It becomes a source. Like this. So it becomes a source. What's called a derivative source of ds, okay? It's now what's called a secondary. It's a secondary makama, and this is of course a primary. I mean, there's a fancy word. I apologize. I don't know what you use all the Yiddish words and so on. No, that's not true. No, that's not true. That is not that. Oh, listen. When you say something like that, you have to say, "Is that really true?" We'll look at this for a second. We're going to look at exactly what you're saying. Okay. Now, what does this thing? Matama, that also matama has a source, and suddenly, okay, it goes to another makabel, okay? Okay, so this is the first makabel, this becomes a second makabel, and so on and so forth. So we see a certain scheme that's happening over here. There's a certain type of action that's going on, I think. We see this. Now, what's important, here we see this. There's something called a matame. And there's something called makabel, and it gives over its tumah makabel. How does it give its tumah? Well, it transmits. But how? That is very important. We find that there's something called the derech that it gives over, what's called the oifen. In English, a fancy word, and you have to apologize. I want to know something, and I really apologize to say this. The greatest language in the world for chokhmah is English. Why? Because English can take one idea and have 20 different words for every idea with its shades. Like, you can have, for example, the color gray. There are many different shades of gray. In English, you can have machshavas, and each shade has its own word. That's why English is a very powerful language. English has over 600,000 words. It's a very powerful language, and I'm not here advertising for the use of English. If you can come up with a Yiddish word, fine. and so on, that would be great. But I'm simply saying this. So when we talk about transmission, something giving over to something, okay, or something carrying it, the fancy word in English is called a vehicle. A vehicle is like a car. It takes you from one place to another. So the transmission vehicle, okay, is a certain way that it does it. Okay, like what are the ways to give over tumah? For example, what are the different ways?
Oil.
Maga, masa, okay,
Hesed.
oil, hesed. All of these really are nothing more than different vehicles, you see. So we have a new concept of the vehicle. So in terms of the scheme, okay, which is what we're doing in Tumah V'Tara, and I'm not going to get too very into Tumah, okay, in terms of the scheme, okay, the action, again, we have a source that generates Tumah. It gives over through a vehicle to the first receiver. That first receiver itself becomes a source, okay, and it gives over to a second one, or rather this is the same thing as this. And then this gives over to another makamo, and so on, okay. Wait, that's the second idea. Now there's one more idea, very important. How much tumah does it have? It's called the strength of tumah, or in English, the fancy word, the magnitude, or what's called in Hebrew, fancy Hebrew, the kamus. How much tumah does it have? Okay, and here we have something different. How do we measure that? We measure that what? We have, when we look at all the different powers of tumah, you have what's called, you have the aviyah voice of Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, and so on. You see. Now, what is this? Well, it depends. You see. Now, this is already something. This is already something that we don't really know. It depends. The source, for example, is in the halacha. If the generative source is an avela, then the amount of tumah or the power of its tumah is called an of. But if the source is a dead person, a mace, okay, who's Jewish, okay, then the power of its tumah is called aviyavos, and so on. You see? So it depends. So this can have different degrees. So another concept here is the amount of tumah. But we find an instant law. When this gives over tumah to a receiver and so on and so forth, what happens to the power of it, or the magnitude? It descends. So we see a certain principle. For some reason, the principle that when suddenly tumah is transmitted to another receiver, it starts to go down in power. So an of makes a rishon, an avivos makes an of, and so on and so forth. But that's a principle. It doesn't have to be that way. The Torah says that. The Torah gives you the laws of how tumah operates. Why? We don't know yet. We don't know. But that's called a certain principle or a certain law. The law of transmission is that when tumah is transmitted, it goes down. But there could be exceptions to that rule. What? There could be made right. There could be certain exceptions to this rule. Now, this is the scheme of Taurus. Did we leave out information? Yes, we did. Because the question, we're seeing really the movement. We're seeing the movement of tumah and so on. The movement. And there are laws that describe this movement. And that's what all the halachas. All the halachas really talk about what? They're laws, halachas. But this is a very, very important thing that you understand about the laws of the Torah. And I'm going to say this again when I come to Nezikin. Okay. When I say that something is tamei, what is it really? Is it real? Is it fiction? Is it real? What is it? Is it something imaginary? Okay? And the answer is, it's real. We're not talking about some kind of when we say it's a halacha, the halacha is not something that we agree on, for example. And let me explain. According to society, they say if you steal something, okay, let's say there's a law in the criminal code that says if you steal something, okay, a certain item above a certain amount of money, you will go to jail. That's what it says. So let's say a person says he steals something, okay? Let's say he steals a sefer. Let's say it's a very expensive sefer, he goes to jail. Now, does he go to jail just because he stole it? He stole something. Does that mean he goes to jail? Well, the law says he goes to jail. But is it real? Does he go to jail? No. You have to catch him first. You got to catch him. If you catch him, then you can put him in jail. So therefore, the law that says if you steal cause, you will go to jail, that law, the cause and effect relation, is something that is only sponsored or supported if you catch him by a person. That's called a conventional law. You say, if you do this, then this is going to happen. Will it happen really? Does it have to happen? No. If we catch you, it happens. Like they say about taxes. They say, it's not illegal to cheat on your taxes. It's illegal to get caught. Okay, that's a different halacha. But the bottom line is, this is what the counter did in this thing. Here's the point. In the Torah, when the Torah says that something is tamei, it's not saying it's something we all agree on. It's saying it's tamei, which means that if you acquire tumah, this is not something that we all agree on. When the Baruch Shem says you are tamei, this is a very serious matter. He's talking about something which exists. It's a state, it's a matzav which exists. How do we know that it's something which exists? How do we know we have to treat it like something real? It is not simply what's called a haskama, a muskam, where people agree that if you do this, this is going to happen. No, it exists.
Even if no one knows it.
What's that?
Even if no one knows.
You don't catch them.
The tumor, so it's a tumor.
Right. And you see the Torah takes it seriously. Why? Because if you're Tomei and you walk into the Beis HaMikdash, you can die. Of course. That's serious. You know? That's a sin. It means that when you're Tomei, something's sitting on you. What that is, we cannot see it. We cannot observe it. But there's something on you. It's a certain matzav, a certain condition that's on you that has to be treated with respect. And there are certain halachas which shows you something very important. The concept, what a halach is. Halach is not simply a law in the typical sense of the word, which society creates. Society creates laws, okay? A law is a cause and effect. If this happens, then this happens. If you do this, then this happens. But there's no real relationship. There's no natural relationship in Metzias itself that says the two things are connected. It's only connected because we say it, and we have to connect them. The connection between the cause and effect in all law depends on whether or not it can be what's called enforced. You see, otherwise it's nothing. But in the Torah doesn't deal with that kind of thing. You see, the Torah simply says this is what it is, and whatever it is exists in the item itself. Which means that all the halachas of the Torah talk about real things, except that the Torah is not talking so much about energy. Okay? So the Torah is talking about things which we cannot see. All the things the Torah is talking about are invisible to us. There is no way that we can really sense it in whatever sense. We cannot do that and so on. You see, but nevertheless they are real. So the Torah is talking about these things, Metzias entities, which exist in the world of Ruchnius. These are Ruchniistic entities. These are spiritual entities which actually exist. That's what it is. Which means something important. What does it mean? Oh, this changes the whole way we're supposed to learn Maseches Taurus. Because really, when we study the laws of Taurus, what are we really studying? What do we really want to know? What we want to know is this: what is Tumah? Because all the halachas of Tumah V'Tara really are nothing more than a description of how Tumah behaves. That's all it is. How does it behave? How does it start? How does it finish? Where does it go? So all the laws are really what's called, when you study the Tumah event itself, which is real. And in the end, your goal is to understand, if you can, what is Tumah? What is it? Why does it do this? For example, okay, watch. Okay. If the matame of the original source, the generative source, if the matame is an avela, okay, it's matama, right? How? To what's called touching or carrying it, magid masa. Good. For some reason, an avela can only transmit it in those two ways. A mace, okay, which is another erase, translated by something called by oil. Now wait a minute. Oil is a whole different thing. In an oil, you're not coming to contact with the item at all, but in oil, okay, somehow the tumah is like radiated out, almost like a radiation of some sort, where it's contained in the thing. There's something about it. So you have to ask a kasha. Okay, the kasha you would ask is this: why is it that a mace is matama oil and a veil only b'magamasa? What is it? So you say, well, maybe it has to do with Naviavos. If you're Naviavos, then the tumah is so powerful that it can be transmitted through what's called like an oil. Or not. I can't answer that question. But that's a valid question to ask. You would never ask that question. Why? You would say, well, that's Exeris Akasov. The fact that it's Exeris Akasov is not an answer. The question is, okay, not why the Baruch Shem did that, but what is the Baruch Shem doing? What is the Torah doing when suddenly a mace, the nature of the tumah of a mace, the nature of the tumah of a mace is oil, and the nature of the tumah of a nevela is not. Is that a difference in tumah? Is there a difference in eichas? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe not. But see, these are the questions you'd ask. You would never ask that question if you start learning halachas. Because what you would do in halachas is simply finding out what is the halacha. That's it. You'll be satisfied. Oh, the halacha is azor. The halacha is this halacha, this halacha. But the truth of the matter is that the real way to study Tumah Torah, okay, because no one really studies it like this, is to understand what is the event or the mitzvah that we're talking about. Why does it behave the way it does? And why does it change depending on so many things? I don't know. But that's really what the study is. That would be similar to like science. Science doesn't study, okay, simply what is the law, but it wants to know, why is this law true? Where does it apply? Why is the law here but not here? What you're studying now is really you're studying halachas, okay, as what's called events. The fancy name for that, an event that happens in nature is called a phenomenon. That's a whole different thing, and that really is chokhmah. When you study Tumah Torah, understand why it behaves this way, under what circumstances, and what explains its behavior this way as opposed to this way. Why does it shift and change? Now you might say to me, it's impossible to know the answers. And I tell you, it is not impossible to know it. It is impossible for you to know it because you're not studying it for that reason. This chokhmah, when you study something like the chokhmah, then you're studying the thing itself, why it behaves. You're trying to explain why it behaves that way. That's a very different way involved. And the truth is, it's possible. If you change the way you study it, suddenly you see it a whole different way. Now that's not my purpose, and I'm not going to go on. Okay, one more thing that we have to say about the scheme of Tumah Torah is one more element, is that once you have Tumah, can you get rid of it? Yeah, you can get rid of it, of course. So that's what's called the removal of this state called Tumah. So you have mikvah, you have paradum, and so on and so forth. So then finally, one of the things in the scheme of it would be there will be certain ways, okay, of removal. You would remove the tumah, okay? And then the question is, what ways? Like mikvah. So then the question is, why is it a mikvah will remove an av, but it won't remove an aviyavos? That's a very good question. So you'll say to me, it's exersa kasav. And I'll tell you that's true, meaning that the Banishim wanted it this way, but it's not so simple. He did something to all the halachas that it has to move in this way. You see, it's like science. When science studies, we all know what gravity is, basically. You have two objects that attract each other. Okay, so science in all the different possibilities and to understand why. Now I'm not going to go into this thing. That's a fourth method which we have, which I have not explaining at all. That's way beyond this, and that's a method called reduction, and that's when we get this clear, we can talk about that. But that's really what's going on over here. So fundamentally, when you learn halachas, and now watch. Now let's see what happens when you learn the Gemara or Mishnah when you take into his account. You're going to see something very strange. Now, if you look at all the missions in Tumah Torah, okay, let's look at them. Okay, first Maseches Kalim. When you look at Kalim is as a Masechta. It talks about certain halachas, but where on the scheme is it fit? Kalim is talking about what part of this entire picture? What part? Somebody tell me. What part of this picture is Kalim talking about?
Transmission.
What?
Transmission.
Right. Kalim is a Masechta devoted to one idea. I mean, basically, it's the idea is who can be Makabel. Kalim is a Masechta talking about this part of the scheme Kalim focuses on. That's where it belongs. That's the next is Oros. Where is Oros talking about? Oros talking what? Right. Oros is talking about a certain type of transmission. You see, exactly. It's a certain type of transmission. Next, Negoyim. Source. A certain type of a source in Torah. It also happens to be that Torah is Matama B'Biyah also. It's a different transmission. So it really talks about two of these things. Biyah being very similar to Ohel in a certain sense. Right. So Torah is then talking about a certain type of a source. Okay. Torah. Right. Torah is now analyzing a certain type of removal. Removal of what? It's removing a certain type of tumah which has a magnitude of an aviyah voice. Right. You go further. Mikvos. Again, we're talking about the removal, but a certain type. Okay. Machshirin. Right. It's all to the makabel. It's a certain inyan. It's a certain feature of a makabel. Okay. A zovim. certain type of a sauce. Right. Tvul yoim. No. Tvul yoim. What? Removal. Tvul yoim is talking about a certain type of removal, of how fast the removal takes place. So there's a concept of what's called speed. How, when you have a removal, let's say if you have a mikvah, and then you have a problem, how fast does it take place? In what steps? Does it all of it go? Does part of it go? Right? And so on and so forth. Okay. So what I'm saying is something interesting. You can take the entire Seder of Taharos and suddenly you see all the Masechtas exactly where they fit. But the most important thing of a Seder is to understand the scheme. Why? Because this is the action. This is what's going on. And there are many parts to this and so on. The reason why this is so powerful is not it only tells you the fundamental structure, but it does something. It does something more than that, and this is very powerful. And so what it does, it allows you to compare halachas. See, normally you cannot compare. Tosfos compares Gemaras. He compares different Gemaras, different Mandamim, different people's own, and he compares halachas in different places. But Tosfos doesn't necessarily analyze the different halachas. But when you have this kind of a scheme, you can actually compare halachas, and by comparing halachas, you start to see the real depth. For example, you would compare halachas how? You would say, why is it that certain type, what levels of tumah, magnitude, in other words, how do they connect with the removal? In other words, why is an avivos needs a para, an ov, or a rishon needs a what you call a mikvah, and so on. You start to actually compare all over the place. You would never do this if you're just learning halachas alone. Okay, and that's the power of this kind of thing. Okay, I picked this over here just to give you an idea that the concept of how you begin to masada. This is a structure, but it is an activity structure. It's what's happening in Tumah Torah. Normally you would never see this. You would look at each Masechta separately and never think about all the others. You'd never see, okay, what does Torah have to do with Zavim? What does Torah have to do with with Oros? You would never think of the comparison of any of them because you're sitting there, you're learning this Mishnayos, and that's it. If you're learning it in what do you call it, in Daf Yomi, you're even worse off. Because the whole thing is fragmented into many little pieces. You never get a chance to see the whole play, the whole thing as it's moving and so on. Why do you need to do that? Because fundamentally, if you don't do that, if you do it your way, it's in such small pieces that you never see the picture. What's the advantage of seeing the picture? Is that suddenly you can start to see, to compare things, and get a much deeper understanding of what's going on. Okay, that's it for Tumah V'Tara. We now go on to Nezikin. What's that? Yeah, so the limit, right? Why is there a limit? That's another question. And then you begin to see where this thing moves. Now, when you teach, if you're going to teach your Talmidim, if you have a yeshiva and you're going to teach your Talmidim, Taharos, you can't just start in a Masechta like Kalim or whatever the story is. You have to start with the scheme, and you have to say the Masechta that we're learning belongs here. And then they start to understand where it fits. Remember I told you last time about the forest? That when you don't want to be if you're in the middle of the forest, you can only see the trees. You want to take a helicopter and go up to see the relationship of forest, desert, mountains, and the whole, what's called in English, the terrain. And then you want to start to go down. You see, this is the cloud. This is the overview of the whole thing as it takes place. And as you learn each Mishnah, okay, or each Masechta, even each Mishnah, you want to know where is it in this diagram. Because this is the overall diagram.
How do I know how to compare the next way through?
Now, what's that?
If we see the other thing, here was the pillar, there's a reason for this. How do I know if the connection is true or not?
You don't, you have to know how to do it.
That's the reduction.
It's time now that you know that there's such a thing called a connection. You know, that's the first condition. That you can make such a connection. It's a whole, that's a different part. Okay. Let's go. What about Nezikin? We want to do the same thing. We're going to be learning Bava Kama. So we want to do Nezikin. But I'm going to do something even bigger now. Okay? We're graduating, okay? We're going to do something even higher, because I'm going to show you now something which is called the relationship of structures. So there's what's called main structures, and there are substructures, or small ones, smaller ones. And you're going to see something called a major blueprint, smaller blueprints. You're going to see how the whole thing builds from this thing of Nezikin here. So let's do Nezikin. Now, we look at the more like Bava Kama, it's talking about Mazik, it's talking about Zikin, Mazel Tov. Okay, what's the scheme? What's happening? What is happening in Bava Tzia? What are the different elements in this entire action? What? And you have to remember something. This is something. For your Talmidim, for those of you who are involved in Chinuch, okay, if you teach without consulting this type of diagram, without giving them the overview, where they always know, it's like a GPS. The chachma of a GPS is you always know where you are, and where you are with respect to all the streets and the maps. That alone changes the entire motive to learn. When somebody's in the middle of nowhere, and he has no idea where he is, it's much more difficult. But if somebody knows where he's located, in a much broader picture, he knows right now I'm over here. And when I finish this, I'm going to go here and here. He mamish has a goal and a seder. So suddenly the brain clicks. The brain becomes fascinated, okay? It becomes fascinated how fundamentally it begins to build, like building blocks. He's like building things slowly. Gradually, the entire thing takes shape. This is very important for chinuch. You can try it and see on a certain level. I mean, you don't have enough yet. We're going to be working on this thing and so on. But right now, we're just working on the overall picture. Let's look at the scheme of Nezikin. Okay, what's happening in Nezikin? What?
There's a mazik, there's a nizik, and then there's the oifen hazik.
Oh, it's a little bit like Tumah Tower, but not exactly. Good. Okay, so let's do this. There's a mazik. Okay. Also, there's a nizik. Okay, the one who gets the damage. Okay, the victim in this case. And then there's what's called the oifen of Hezek. Good. That's the picture. Good. You got the picture. So it's talking about something very specific. Now, Bava Kama. Now, there's something else. There's a mazik, there's a nit and so on. But there's another concept that what? If you have done this, then this entire picture leads to what? To something called Hezek, and then that leads to something called Hashlumen. What? You have to pay. That's fundamentally the picture of Nezikin. Well, we'll get to that in a second. That's the overall, that's what's called the picture, the holistic picture. Now, once you have this picture, okay, we say to ourselves, okay, what does the Gemara Bava Kama do? Okay, the Gemara Bava Kama, I assume most of you have done it once in your life or something like that. And you've been through the roads of yeshiva. You don't want the first Masechta is Bava Kama and so on. The question is like this: the whole Masechta Bava Kama is divided into different prakim. So what fundamentally does Bava Kama really discuss mostly? I'm not talking about the Gemara, just the Mishnahs. Fundamentally, which concept is it mostly discussing? Is it discussing different types of mazikim? Is it discussing the different... What is it really discussing? What is it focused on when you look at this diagram, the Masechta Bava Kama?
The liability, the source of the mazik, the source of the mazik.
Mostly, Bava Kama, it's talking about the mazik. What's that? Yeah, well, okay, in a sense, but the real analysis of most of it is the mazik, okay, is the mazik itself, different types of mazik in terms of what, how they produce, and the oifen of Hezek. That's most of the Masechta. What's that?
No. It's the mazik.
The mazik, sorry. All right, it's mostly talking about a mazik. Now, when you look at a mazik, how would you divine the mazikim? Okay, you've learned Bava Kama. Just quickly, I'm not going to go into a thing. How would we talk about the mazikim, okay? Who could be a mazik? So when you really think about it, okay, a mazik can really be two things. When you look at all Bava Kama, one type of mazik, okay, would simply be Adam, okay, a man, a person. A person could be a mazik. But when you say Adam mazik, there are three different oifanim that a person can be mazik. You divide the mazik called an Adam, okay, which in this case is called an Adam like this, okay, and there are three different ways that he could do it. Actually, 2 different ways, but okay. What are the 3, 2 or 3 different, it's really 2 different ways and so on. So, 1 second. No. 1 second. I'm going to erase this now. We don't need the full thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the substructure of what's called a mazik. Just to show you what a masechta looks like and how you have to teach the masechta. Mazik. Okay. What is a mazik? Who can be a mazik? Okay. So first of all, first mazik is what's called adam. Adam a mazik. How does a person do damage? The person himself, how does he do damage?
With his actions.
Okay. Well, we need to look. So let's look at it. If a man, okay, let's look at it. If a man comes over, takes the chair, and puts a hammer, and he breaks the chair, how did he just damage the chair? With his goof, okay? So this would be, he would do damage, okay, with his goof in this case, okay? And he would damage the direct object itself. But there's another way he can be a mazik.
No.
There's another way another to a mazik.
Throwing something.
Like a choivel. A choivel. Okay, what's a choivel? Choivel is the same thing, whether break the chair by breaking someone else's head. In essence, he's using his goof to hurt someone. So the difference, okay, so either he can break an object, okay, he breaks an object, or he can break another person, another adam. Now the difference here, see, this is an incorrect diagram. That's an incorrect diagram. You have to be very meticulous when you make these diagrams. Okay, so the first thing we're looking at what's called adam amazik, okay? And an adam amazik can, well, he breaks it with his goof, let's say he breaks with his yad. He breaks with his hand. In this case, okay, he can either hurt another person, which is another adam, the nizik could be another adam, or the nizik can be a chayfetz, an object. Okay, in this case, if the adam, by his goof, with his hands, hurts another person, he's called a choivel. And if he breaks it, an object, okay, he's not called a choivel, he's simply said to be adam hamazik. That's all. Now, this is the mazik. This is the mazik with my adam. Okay? So, with his kuf, he can either hurt this kind of nizik, adam, and he's called a choivel, or he can hurt an object, and then he's called a mazik. So that's one way a person can do damage. Okay, this over here, this level, this level here is the nizik. 2 different niziks. So depending on the nizik, he's either called a choivel or he's called a mazik. So there's a whole perik in Bava Kama that talks about. There's a whole perik in Bava Kama that talks about. There's a whole perik in Bava Kama, okay, that devotes itself, okay, to Adam HaMazik when this is the nizik, choivel. Yeah, Chamish Dvom, so whatever stories. That the whole perik is devoted to this line, that line, okay, like this way. Now, what about Adam HaMazik who destroys objects? Well, there's Gemara also talks about. There's not a perik on that, but it's among the prokim there. It talks about Adam HaMazik and Hamniach Zakad, for example. In Hamniach, it talks about when a man actually destroys objects. He lays on them, whatever the story is. Okay. Now, is there any other way an Adam can do damage besides destroying something with his goof? What's that? Who? A shomer? No. Yeah. Okay, but that a shomer is different. Okay. That already has to do. It's a different angle. It's true, but I don't want to include that in the picture. Shomer would be involved in. See, I don't want to get into. I want to go to the mamish hezek. Pshia doesn't mean he did the hezek. Pshia means he didn't watch it. It's a son and shmira. It's not about hezek. I'm talking about someone really damaging directly. Yeah. No. What else? How else can a person damage something? What? What? A different oifen. No. What else? No. Yeah. These are all chilukim. I agree with you. But that's not what I'm looking for. There's another way he can damage tremendously.
Throw something.
What?
Throw it.
His mouth?
I don't care what he does it with. There's another way it does it. There's a whole different way that a conversion do it. What's that? Who? I know. All of these connect, but there's another way. You're missing it. A ganef. A ganef. What is a ganef? A ganef is Adam HaMazik. Hagon Maruba. There's a whole parak in Bava Kama that talks about Genev and Gezela. What is it? How does a ganef damage something? What? What does he really damage? That's why you think that an Adam is a mazik only when he does it directly. No. But what's the difference between a ganef, okay, and this case, okay, there's a ganef and there's a gazlan, which is really similar. But this, I want you to fill in this box. What is the oifen that a ganef, how does a ganef damage something? What does he do? What's that? What? A ganef does what? What does a ganef do? What is he actually doing? Look, if somebody breaks a chair, he comes over with a hammer and he breaks it into pieces. What does a ganef do?
Change the property.
Change the what?
Ownership.
What?
Ownership.
No, he doesn't. What does he? No, wait a second. Who? If somebody steals something from a person, okay?
If takes away his.
If it takes away from where? From where?
Control.
From my finance.
Use.
Rishus. He goes and he takes away from your rishus. You no longer have the ability to use the object. So he doesn't damage the object itself, but he damages an aspect of bias where you'll be able to use it. That's also a hezek. Because one of the things of a Baal is the ability to use something, to use what you own, okay? So I have a chair, I own this chair, right? I can use it, I can sit on it. What do? A ganef comes over, takes the chair out of my rishus. I have no idea where it is. But now that it's not in my rishus, I have no control. But without control, I can't use it. He interferes with my ability to be nishtamish, to use something. So that's considered a mazik also. But it's a mazik in terms of my use. But the Gemara considers that hezek also. The araya, what? You have to pay. You got to pay kefil. It's even worse. A guy from Gaza. Okay, what does a Gazlan have to do? A Gazlan has to return the object. How? To give it back to you in shus. Let's say he didn't damage it. He's got to take the thing and give it back to you. All he's doing is not touching the object. What he's touching is what's called in English access. That means you no longer have access to your thing. You can't use it. So in essence, a guy from the Gaza damaged what's called access. And therefore, because you don't connect to it, that's called access in English, therefore it interferes with your shimush. But he's not damaging your shimush, he's damaging your access to it, which means he's taking it out of your what's called rishus. But the Torah says that's also hezek. So look, this is the description of Adam. And a ganef and a gazlan are very similar. What's the difference between a ganef and a gazlan? Well, one does it with the das of them. He goes over to you with a gun or something. The other one you don't even know. Whatever. But you see, this diagram now fundamentally shows you all the different ways that an Adam could become a mazik. And this is come up over Kama. You see. Does everyone see what I'm doing here? See the problem? The problem is that we think in pieces. Nobody would ever think that a ganef is a mazik. Then why is there a whole parak in Bava Kama about a ganef? Or why is there prokim in Bava Kama that talk about gazolim and ganovim? Because they're mazikim. The problem is if they're mazikim, fine. How are they mazik? So right away you start to think. How are they mazik is compared to someone else. How do they do that? You see. So we realize that an Adam could either damage biyodoi, and it depends on the nizik. What is called either choyvel or mazik, but he can also damage by what's called interfering with what the English word is access. Give me a Hebrew word for access.
Gisha.
What? Give me a Hebrew word.
Shlita.
No, shlita comes from access. You control it when when you have the ability. It's in your. Give me a Hebrew. Now you know why English is so good. Now you what? I don't know, give me a Yiddish word, a Hebrew word, Hungarian word. I'll take anything. What?
Zutritt. Zutritt.
Sitrit?
Zutritt.
What is that, Hungarian?
No, Zutritt.
What's that?
Nice. Okay, met Charles nog een keer.
Okay, stop. Do we see what I'm saying? So, if you're going to teach Bava Kama to your Talmidim, how many people in this room are Machancha? Raise your hand. Only one?
3.
You're Machanach? You too, okay. So, okay, most of you are not Machanach. What are most of you?
Okay.
Who's a Menahel? You're a Menahel? Guess what? You see my point? You understand something? You walk into a class, and I'm talking like, because I want to help Machanchim here, and also talk to alumni. You walk into a class, and you start from Abovus Nazika. They don't know what you're talking about. You know, everything, it's like everything is a plot, everything is a little piece. The first thing you do, you get over there, you go on the board there, and you draw this. Once you draw this, they now know in the entire Masechta of Bava Kama, Vima Fangdois, where we're starting, where we end, they suddenly see the whole picture. And every time, what's that?
Hasha'a, Yeshut,
Who?
Hasha'a,
What at the hour?
Hasha'a.
Sure.
Oh, Harsha. Meaning what? Access. What?
No.
Access.
Hour of access. Shul is a koyach.
So therefore, this... No, I didn't. There's more. Just other. Well, this is only on the mazik. No, this is not. The overall structure is what the gentleman said. There's the mazik, there's the nizik, that's the overall. But within that structure, under mazik, you have this. And most of Bava Kama talks about this chelek, or this part of the structure.
Why did they add the nizik in here? This is the structure of mazik, of Udam mazik.
Structure of Odom mazik. What's that? Yeah, how does Bava Kama divide this? Okay. You see what I'm saying? It's a very big difference. This takes the confusion out of the whole thing. Now, we're going to go... Now we're going to do something very powerful. Much more powerful than this. You see, to see it on the board, you see it, but you have to construct this yourself. Can you do it? It's not easy. But after a while, once you start to be able to do this, and you think like this, suddenly there's no such thing as a halacha that stands alone. You know? It says there, Am levoidei b'shchoin. The whole concept of Chadashot is by itself. When it comes to machshava, this is also to stand by itself. Halacha cannot stand by itself. Every halacha has to be included in some kind of a complete, it's like a guf, it's like an odom. It has to be completely connected. That's the thing that comes with that. Okay, now we're going to do something even better, even wider than this, okay? And so you're going to see what happens as you keep on applying this over and over again. You're going to start seeing chidushim coming out that you've never seen before. So let's go on to the next level. So if you want to write, whoever wants to, is taking notes, I don't know if you want to write this down. But this is called the scheme. Now, that's the scheme. We spoke about the scheme of Taurus a little bit, the scheme of Ezekiel, okay? But there's a much wider. What I'd like to talk about now is the scheme of Seder Ezekiel. That's Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra, and so on, the whole thing. How do we look at the whole thing? Is it possible? I mean, it's not easy. and so on? And the answer is you can't. And once you start to see it, you're going to be shocked at certain things that are going on. So let's look at even larger schemes, okay? Now, I understand, okay, it's not easy to do this. You're not trained to think like this. But but with a certain amount of practice, and if you people are really interested to do this and so on, you can acquire this. But again, it depends on and so on. So. If you look at the whole concept, all above the three bovas, the whole Seder Ezekiel, what is going on over here, really, in terms of things? Baba Kama talks about mazikim, talks about a mazik. But the whole concept of a mazik is really a plot. That whole structure that we have is only one chelik of a much bigger picture. So what I want to do is give you the bigger picture, the larger picture, and so on. I don't expect you, there's no way you're going to do this on your own, not at this level. But I want to just show you examples of what I mean and what you can do with it once you have it. When you look at the entire Nezikin, all of the Nezikin is concerned with one thing: bias, ownership, an owner, really, and all the different possibilities of biaship. Now, before I get into this, you have to understand something which is very strange. Normally, a Baal or an owner, let's say for example here, I own this thing. I own this. Okay? What does that mean? Because I can use it. Or I can sell it. Okay, or whatever the story is and so on. Now, does anyone see, if this thing is sitting over here, okay, and I happen to own it, and I walk away, can you see that I own this? No. Ownership is invisible. It is. There's no way to know, unless the person, if you have a Baal Ruach HaKodesh, they can see that. You should know something. A Baal Ruach HaKodesh can actually feel a connection between you and your objects. Because the truth is, if you own something, your mind is connected to it. Except that connection is invisible. It's not like ownership is something we all agree on. You own it, and therefore I have to ask your permission to use it. No, no, no. Your ownership of this is a real metzius. There's something between you and this object, okay, that indicates some kind of a connection. It's a metzius. It's a buchtinstical metzius. That's why when it says in the criminal code in New York, it says if you steal someone, okay, what does it say? It says you have to, you'll go to jail or something like that, or whatever, depending on grand larceny, whatever the story is. So what it's really saying is that if you get in between someone and when you go to jail, if we catch you, but according to the Torah doesn't say if we catch you or not. The Torah says if you steal something, okay, you're chayav. That's it. Now, does it make a difference if we catch you or not? No. Because when you steal something or you break something, you did something. In reality, you did something to the connection between me and the object. It's a metzius. We cannot measure this. We cannot see it. But it's true, it exists. So therefore, what you did, for example, you did something, if I go over and I take one of your objects and I break it, I did something to your connection. If you own this, and I did something to your connection. Now what does that do? If I did something to your connection to this object, something happens to me in my neshama. There's a pagam, there's a damage in my neshama. Yeah, so even if let's say you never catch me and I never give back your money, that damage stays with me. You mean? Meaning they're going to get me up there, or whatever the story is. Why? Because when I walk around, I'm going to walk around, when my neshama walks around, my neshama is going to have a hole on the left side. And that hole comes from the fact that I took your thing and I have to pay you back. So in other words, the punishment doesn't say, God doesn't say, if you steal something, you know what I mean, you're going to go to jail or you have to pay. He says, you know something, if you steal something, what really happens is you're damaged. Until you pay back, you're damaged. So the damage you did is in you. Why? Because you actually did something to his connection to that. In other words, we're dealing with what we call in English phenomena. We're dealing with real events. And the halachas of Nezikin are real. This is not an imagination. That's what the difference between when the Bonishim makes halacha, when the Bonishim makes a law, it's different than when people make a law. When people make a law, the word is lav dafka. If you steal something, nothing happens unless they catch you. If they don't catch you, you're free. But in the Torah, if you do some damage and so on, that's it. You are nailed. In other words, something mamish happens to you. If you want to take off the pagam, fine, then pay the guy back or whatever the story is. If you don't do that, you mamish have there's a pagam, there's a damage that you did to yourself that stays. And that's very important to understand about the concept of Torah. You have to understand this concept, what a halacha is. A halacha is not a law that's agreed on by people. It is not. That's the law of people, of New York State, the USA, the governments. Okay? That's what it is. There's a shayla even on Ben Noach. When the governments of countries like Goyim, they make laws, the question is, does it become a metzius or not? That's an interesting question. You know, do their laws have the same power for them as our halachas have for us? That's a very interesting question. You know, I'm not sure about that. You know, you have to kind of see the. But without a question, the Tayyag mitzvahs have a power over you in the sense that they have an effect. Those laws represent what's called cause and effect relationships that happened whether you like it or not. It doesn't make a difference. You understand that? Because of that, the whole study of Torah, the Tayyag mitzvahs, is different. If you really understood this, again, like I'm saying before, what you're studying fundamentally, in the case of Nezikin, is Bailis. But Bailis is real. So when you study all the halachas of Avakam, Avamantiyam, Avasor, you're studying the Metzius called Bailis. All its different ways it behaves. What happens in this case? What happens in that case? And so on. And in the end, what you really want to know in the end is, what is Bailis? What is that connection? What is it? Why is it that it behaves this way and opposed to another? So, we're going to do that. The scheme of Nezikin really rests on Bailis. So let's see what that scheme looks like. So, first of all, you have something called Bailis is a relationship between a subject or person, okay? That's a person, okay? And then something else called an object, okay? And in between, okay, there's something called a relationship, or the way it says in Hebrew, a yachas. Oh, this is the scheme of all Nezikin. There's a subject, there's a person, and so on. Okay, there's an object, another thing. There's a relationship. Now the relationship that we're concerned with, let's look at that, is called Bailis. So the first example of a relationship is called Bailis. Okay, are there other relationships? Are there other relationships that we need to consider? It's a good question. You see, are there other types of relationships besides Bailis? That's a good question. Sometimes, for example, like what? Like a shomer. You see, like shomer. Shomer have a certain type of relationship with Adam. What are those relationships? Well, whatever that is, but you have to also examine that. What's that? Yeah, so what we want to examine is that, but it's not that simple this way. Okay, now wait a minute. Now, let's look at bias. Okay, let's look at it. Let's say a person comes, I see this chair, okay? And it's sitting there. I have no relationship. Let's say it's Hefka. Nobody owns this. And I have no relationship with this object, okay? So, what is my relationship? That relationship, there is no relationship. That relationship, therefore, was called Hefka. Hefka means I have no relationship with that object. Let's use the word Hefka. I have none. But that's also a relationship. That's a zero. Bias is 1, none is a 0. So, either I relate to this thing in bias or not. What's the definition of bias? What if I have a relationship with an object where I'm a Baal? What does that mean? What does bias mean? Well, it means several things. These are called, what's called its bechinas, or its properties. 1, I can use it. I can use it at will. Whenever I want, I can use it. Okay, can you use it? No. If you don't have the relationship to bias, you can't use it. So therefore, my bias gives me reshus, it gives me the ability to use it. Okay, what else does it do? It allows me to give it away, to transfer. I can go over to you and say, here, I'm giving you this, so therefore I transfer my bias to you. Mechira. So it allows me now to give it away. Only I can give it away. So my bias, my connection to that object, allows me, 1, to use it, it allows me to give away. So its fundamental properties of bias, okay, is what? Is that on this side, okay, I'm bias, okay, it's 1, shimush, I can use it, okay, mechira, I can sell it, okay. But, okay, so I can do these things and so on and so forth, you see, that you can't do. So the definition of that relationship is well, it's called an operation definitely, but that's what I can do. Now wait, now the question is this, fine. So I see, now if something is hefka, like I walk over to a chair that I don't own at all, let's say nobody owns it, okay, Can I use it? Can I sell it? No. I first have to establish a relationship with it. So to create this relationship, okay, what is the name of an action when you create the relationship? Kinyan. Right. So therefore, this, it's called an acquiring action. It's an acquiring, and that's a kinyan. That is a certain type of action that creates the relationship. Now, if I can create a relationship, can I get rid of the relationship? Yes. Okay. So I can do the same thing. I can dismiss or eliminate the relationship. Okay. What is that called? The dismiss relationship. It says I no longer have this relationship. What? No, that's the name I have got. But what is that called? We don't really have a. What's the name of an action which I can get rid of something? Let's call that. Okay. Let's call that siluk. Okay. It's an action of siluk. How would I do that? Okay. What is the kinyan? There are many kinyan, right? There are many ways I can claim it. So there's halachas that talk about
under which category?
Acquiring. It's on between subject and relationship. I acquire.
On the subject?
Yes, no, it's really in between subject and relationship. It's over here. There's an I create the subject creates the relationship, the object. That's called kinyan. Now the subject can also dismiss it, and that's called sealer. How could I destroy my bias in something? I'm after it. What else? What?
You can't give it away. You can sell it. You can't give it away.
Yes, I could sell it, but in that case, I'm not destroying the bias. What I'm doing is I'm transferring it. That's a different thing. How can I destroy my bias in something? Hefka is one way. What's another way?
Burn it. Break it.
No.
Bittel, chametz.
Bittel chametz. So examples of that of siluk, okay, would be hefka, and would be bittel. Those examples will I directly remove my relation. So the picture becomes interesting. A great deal of Boropark, or whatever it's called now, please. A great deal of Boropark talks about kinyanim, but it's really it's focusing on this aspect of this picture and tone. Okay, now let's look at the objects. What can I own? What can I own? Like what? I can own an object. I can own something which is not alive.
Person.
I can own a person. And you see the amazing thing that the Torah says that this relationship bias actually extends to different. It extends to a chaypes, something which is not living, which can either be real estate or metal. That doesn't make a difference. But it also says I can do this to a person, which is a shock. The Torah says you can actually own a person, whatever that means. That's amazing. Okay, how can you own a?
That's kedushin already.
What's that? Wait, 1 second. So I can own a person, and that would be called an eved. Whatever. Okay. Who else can I own? You just said it. I can own my wife. 1 minute. 1 second. The Torah says an amazing thing. The Torah says that in a relationship between a man and a woman, it calls this bias. But the bias of a subject to an ish, a man and woman, has a special name. It's called what? Ishus. Oh, so we see that the whole seder of Nashim is a subdivision of this. It's amazing. You know, if the object of your bias happens to be your wife, okay, guess what? She's an object. Shlosh Dvom, or you should nick this, but Shlosh Dvom. You know? I mean, don't tell this to your wife. Okay, it's like Shlosh Sani Isha. Whatever. There's a whole hashkaf with that. I'm not going to go into that. But anyway, you have this. But what you're saying is, but this is very powerful. Who would ever think that all the laws of Nashim, Kedushin talks about how you acquire the woman. Gittin talks about how you get rid of the woman. Dismissing. It's a mice of sealing. But with respect to a specific object called an Isha. But wait a minute. Now you have a Madikasha. Why is it to destroy the relationship between a chayfetz, you're mafkid, but to destroy the relationship to your wife, you need a get? Good question. I don't know. Excellent. But you see what we're doing is, by creating this structure, we're starting to compare. This is a system that holds all of Nashim and Nezikins in this one system. Nezikin, rather Nashim, is a one chelik of this system. That's what this is called, the overall, or in fancy English, it's called a macro system, or the large things. Whereas Ishus is a micro or a piece of that. You see. So if you want to, I don't want to compete with anyone on this. We'll leave a certain time for questions. We're almost done with that. But in any case, you see what I'm saying? Now here's another thing also. Okay, Nezikin, Bava Kama. Where does Bava Kama fit into this? Bava Kama. Where does Bava Kama fit? And you have to do, Bava Kama is one of the halachic areas of this entire scheme. This is the overall scheme. Its scheme is so powerful that we see the whole state of Nashim, most of it, Kedushin, Gittin, what do you call it, all of this, and I won't put all fit in it. The Shiur is okay, where does Mazik fit into this? So in some way, what a mazik is, it's an interference. In some way, a mazik is an interfering system. It's an interfering system, that actually interferes with this. What it does is, it disturbs the relationship between the subject and object. Now, here's a very interesting thing.
Why? It disturbs the object.
What's that?
It doesn't disturb the relationship?
No, well, it disturbs the object. Yeah.
It can
When you're disturbing the object,
Neva is disturbing the relationship.
no, it doesn't, because you're still a Baal. It doesn't take, what you do, you take the object out of the Rishus or you're throwing. A mazik is someone that destroys the object, like you're saying. Now, here's the question. Now watch. Here's this. If I say that one of the objects is a woman, what is a mazik called that disturbs the relationship between a man and his wife? What? Soita. Soita. The whole Masechta of Soita really is a subdivision of Nezikin. It discusses simply what a mazik looks like in the specific relationship of a person and the object, in this case, which is his wife. Now, did any of you ever think of a Soita in those terms? No. Yeah. Soita, which is a noyef, is a disruption of this type of an object. In some way, so a noyef is a mazik. It's really what he is. But the difference is this. If you go over and you break somebody's thing or something like that, you're chayav tashlum on Torah. You go over, if someone's a noyef, he's chayav chenek. Why? Well, okay, we can play with that and say, well, there's a husband and wife there, but forget about it, it's sentiment. I'm not interested in feelings or emotions. The Shiur is, well, at least not in this place. The bottom line is, why did the Banishim say that when it comes a mazik on a chair, it's chayav tashlum? A ganav is chayav kefo. But a noyef or a soita is chayav misa. Why? If all it is a disruption, fine, you have a temporary disruption. If a ganav can give back his chaytzev, why can't he give back somebody's wife? It sounds strange. The Torah doesn't allow that. You see, but that's a comparative question. You're now comparing things, you see. Why is it that to dismiss the relationship to a woman you need to get? What? That's the concept of Torah. It doesn't have to be that way. The Banishim says that, but why? Because it has to do with the definition of violence on a woman. Obviously, there's something else going on when it comes to when it comes to kedushin that's very different than when you have an object. But you see, if you want to understand the whole concept of issues, what's that? I don't want Does everyone understand what I'm saying? Excuse me. You see what I'm trying to do? Is it, now, one more thing also. If I take something and I'm about to eat it, what do I have to make? A bracha. Right. So what does that mean? What does it mean? It means, you're mazik. Right. Which means that brachas say, the Gemara brachas is a subdivision of kinyonim. We can look, here's the point. We can look at each one of these things specifically. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show you these are not separate. They look like separate perspectives, but the fact is, this is the scheme that connects them all. It connects all of what? It connects Nashim, it connects even Brachas. It also Zvoyim. When you look at Zvoyim, because in Zvoyim, when you have Matnas Anim, the Banishim says, I'm going to take this away from you. It's a compulsory dismissal of your relationship. Shikha. If you drop that or if you forget about that, it no longer belongs to you. Well, who did that? Well, the Baruch Shem did that, which means that even when you own something, the Baruch Shem never truly gives up. So really, when it shows you the interesting thing, Nachlas shows you that everything's a shutfus. It's a shutfus between you and the Baruch Shem. That you never truly own it in a way where suddenly you dismiss his bias. Normally, in shutfus, two people own it, which means that there is always a double shutf. There's also the Baruch Shem and the subject always. So therefore, whenever you own something, in a certain sense, you're taking it from the Baruch Shem in some sense, or borrowing it, whatever you want to say. But on some level, he still has it. So then, why do you have to be makadosh? Well, in terms of what do you call it? In terms of tamura, in terms of kabbalistness and so on. But what you're now talking about is different bias relationships. What does it mean that you own it yourself? What does it mean that the Baruch Shem owns it? What does it mean that you own it together? So what I'm saying to you is that fundamentally even kachim fits here. Kachim also, because in the end kachim is an Indian of bias. It is. But in this case, it's a shutfus between you and the Baruch Shem. You see, the same thing with Nachlas Aniyim. The Baruch Shem is saying, fundamentally, this payer, this piece of the sun, no longer belongs to you. What do you mean? Who are you to take it away? The Baruch Shem simply says, I'm a shutuf. Why am I a shutuf? I'm the borei. As the borei, in the bechina of being a borei, I could never be masalik my relationship because I'm still creating it. You know, hamachadish b'chol Torah, you doing massive gracious. So the Baruch Shem says, because I'm being machadish and everything, so I'm always a baal also. You can't remove it from the picture. My kinyan is the fact that I'm making it. Oh,
That's also why I came with Shabbos.
well, yeah, okay, right, it was on. So what we're seeing is something, and I'm trying to point this out, which is a very important thing. Well, yeah, well, right. When you really look at this and so on, what you see is again, there's something called structure. Okay, there's something called structure, and we're looking at then. This is the macro structure, the overall structure of many masechtas. Each masechta fits into a different piece of this, and each masechta concentrates on a specific piece. But if you really look at it all, this is the whole thing. So if you're mechanech, or you want to learn, if you want to learn something, just that thing, you're saying, okay, I'm going to study nezikin. So I'm going to study, folks say, all the different ways you can disrupt a bias relationship. And when I'm learning Nashim, I'm learning how do you disrupt a bias relationship if the object is a woman and the bar on. But it's more than that. What you want to understand is, what is the nature of issues? What is the difference between a man and his wife, and a man and his object, and a man and his person, which requires a get shikwa? What is going on over here? What determines what kinyan applies, what siluk applies, what's going on? See, to you it's like, it's all over the place. It's all over the place, and so it's not a hefka. Chas v'sholom. What it is every specific halacha is describing the difference between the bias on this, the bias on that, and so on and so forth. So in the end, we'll begin to understand the whole concept of bias as it fits in with all of many different things. And that's the target. That's what you really want to know. If you want to know. If you want to apply Chachma to Torah, this is what you'll be doing. If you want to stop learning one masech at a time, you want to do your daf yomi, mazel tov, nobody's stopping you. But if you want to learn one masech so that's what you'll have. You'll have 1,000 different pieces, and that's it. But I'm presenting it a whole different way to understand it. And if you present this way to Talmidim, to Mechanech, and this they will grasp it, and they suddenly will see where everything fits, and how each masech covers a specific part, and so on. Does everyone understand what I'm doing? How do you feel about this? Does this make sense?
The whole Torah.
Amazing.
Where does the Zohar come from the Zikin?
Off of the Zohar.
Who's the shul?
No. What the Zohar has to do with the relationship that you have with the bunch of. What's that? Why is it in the Zikin? And that's it. Because when you're even over the Zohar, what do you do between your relationship between you and the bunch of?
No.
Now every mitzvah is tamam midah, but avodah zarah is something you say to the Baruch Shem. You know something? You love dafka. You know Baal. This one. You know I believe in him. So what you really did was you severed your masalik, the relationship that you have with him, and you go into something. That's a seal. That's a shtick like a soita in a way. Well, I mean, you have to think about that. Okay, next week. Next week we will again come back on Thursday, I think here. Is that all right for all of you? Okay, 9:30, we'll again do that thing. But next week what we're going to do is we're going to go more closely into Baba Kama, to the Mishnahs. We're going to see how the Mishnahs are arranged in terms of, what's called sub-diagrams. So you see there's something called the overall structure, there's minor structures and so on. And after you finish and so on. But let me just finish with one more word and say one thing and so on. Okay? I just want to say something to you which is very, very powerful. I once, many, many years ago, about 40 years ago, I experimented with this. I wanted to see what this does to chinuch. Okay? So very good. What I did was, I went to a yeshiva, which for a bunch of Boropark, 15 years old. Most of them, they were really kids, and they were about shuvas for them and so on and so forth. And I wanted to see, if I structure a certain area, how long would it take them to learn it? So I went to this yeshiva in Washington, D.C. and so on, and I taught them, I think for about 9 hours or 10 hours, that's all. I taught them Negoyim. I took Negoyim, I created the structure, okay, and I taught them a great deal of Negoyim, maybe 60-70% of halachas in about 9-10 hours, okay, and so on. And they picked it up in 9 hours. Not only that, months later when they came back to me, they said, because it was all diagrams and connections, they said, I can't forget it. I cannot forget this, because it's all pictures. And they understood all the relations and so on and so forth. I became convinced of something very powerful, and I'm going to say something which is shocking, okay? If you took the entire Mishnah Torah and you reduced it to that, you can teach a person, okay, Kol HaTorah Kula means all in 1 year. If you teach it like that. Where you show the connections and you develop constant connections. In 1 year, you can teach Kol HaTorah Kula with complete memory.
How long should it take to make the structure?
What's that?
How long should it take to make the structure?
But that's a different question. But once the structure is there, because I was able to teach them 70% of the Torah in what? In 9 hours, and then like in 2 days. Right? You could do that with the entire Mishnah Torah. If the Mishnah Torah represents all Payak mitzvahs, let's say, and you did this, which is very possible, I'm not saying you can do it, but if you know that, if you work on that, you could take a bocha, you could take a class, and in 1 year, they would have the entire Mishnah Torah in their head. Okay? But if it has to be done like this, you see why? Because everything is connected. There's no loose strings. Nothing's loose.
You have to know the first of all.
Yeah, you got to do what? Somebody has to structure it. Someone has to do that. But once you have that in that form, you can do the Kol HaTorah Kula in 1 year. This is like a mess. If somebody told you that, I told you 2 things. You can do Kol HaTorah Kula in 1 year, and you can do all of Shas, every Kashan is forwards or backwards. Okay, why? If you learn with structure. Don't learn with structure, then you're learning pieces. Learn with structure, you are learning klolim and pictures and so on. There's a whole different concept.
As of now, I didn't get how
to do it, right?
In the Gemara, you don't know how to...
Well, we didn't, because we didn't know, we didn't know. I
only
have one verse.
Okay,
so next Thursday.
Okay, ich bin nicht sicher wegen der Zeit mit Probieren zu machen, Fries zu sagen, kriegen von der Eulen. Ich bin noch nicht sicher wegen der Tug für
Yeah, for me it's fine. Would you rather have it at 9? Would you have it at 9?
Wo Eulen kann aufschreiben, den Namen besten ist. Der Schicker immer weg. Wer ist hat kein Text, schreiben, also schon Text.
Yeah, everybody has to give him his phone number or text or something, because he has to give him
What's the